Hi, and welcome to The Lamp in the Library. I'm Graeme.
I'm Kim.
And today we're going to be talking about Jeff VanderMeer's latest novel, Hummingbird Salamander, which we both read and we're going to give a review of. Kim, why don't you start us off with a synopsis of this book?
Yeah, so Hummingbird Salamander is written within the genre of a thriller. Some people are calling it an eco-thriller, but I just think it's a thriller because all thrillers deal with some sort of world building and an issue. It seems more like a marketing play, but it's Jeff VanderMeer taking the genre of thriller and putting his climate consciousness stamp upon it. So there's definitely a lot to do with our current climate catastrophe and thoughts about where it's going. The story itself is told through the narrator of Jane. We don't know if that's her real name, but that's the name she decides to take. She is left this mysterious key. She follows the path that it's presented and from that discovers a taxidermied hummingbird, and that lets her just fall down the rabbit hole and have to go on this search of, who's this woman who left this key for her, and then what's the hummingbird mean? And I can't say too much because it's a thriller and there's a lot of, there's secrets and mystery, and as you read, things are getting uncovered for you and you start to connect some of the dots. So we're gonna do a spoiler-free review, just so you know, but all of this world, this thriller, this mystery has to take place within the other worlds of so-called eco-terrorists and the illegal animal trade, and then again, of course, the looming climate catastrophe, which we are currently in. And this book itself just takes place like a little bit in the future, so it's not too different from the world we are in now. Graeme, how was that? Good synopsis?
Yeah, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. I think that covers things.
What did you think of it?
I really, really enjoyed this book. Like I mentioned in the last video, it got me out of a reading slump because I could not put it down. It was engrossing. I think this is an interesting book in that it is clearly written during the pandemic, because the pandemic and masks and people being paranoid about catching pandemic is referenced many, many times during this book. It doesn't mention COVID-19 specifically, but clearly Jeff VanderMeer is tying the COVID-19 pandemic and pandemics at large to the greater ecological crisis. And I think that's a really interesting take on things, because a lot of the narrative around COVID-19 in the media is that it is a bump in the road and it's something that one day we're going to look back on as crazy times as we go back to normality. But he's clearly suggesting that it is part of a greater story of ecological collapse, and that is terrifying. But that is the world that he's presenting here, and it is just a few years in the future, so it's kind of an interesting look at how this kind of would play out, because at the beginning of the book, you kind of get these glimpses into ecological collapse and societal breakdown. And as the story progresses, that kind of background noise becomes the foreground. And I thought that was a really fascinating way of doing it, while well within the conventions of the paranoid thriller genre. So I thought it was an engrossing and very timely read.
Yeah, I read it after Graeme, and I was also in the reading slump that we mentioned last week. And part of my reading slump was brought on by just a high level of anxiety with our current pandemic, and I think I was just reading a bit too much news, so it made it really difficult for me to finish anything. And I think I was slower at getting into it than Graeme was, because it is, you're leaning into your fears when you read it as opposed to going totally escapist.
Yeah, absolutely. It is escapist in the one sense, but in the other sense, you are very much grounded in reality.
Yeah, but I did end up getting into it because it has a real strong pace to it. The sentences are short, they're quick. Even, there's breaks. It moves forward in time. You just always feel like you're going forward, so you get wrapped up in that momentum. So, you know, I think it is good for just helping you pick up something that you'll definitely finish, because you'll want to see where it's going. And there's points within the book where you'll feel quite lost. Like you're just not sure how things are connecting and where it's going. But, you know, that's part of the fun of that genre in general, I would say. I did find that the narrator was a bit of an interesting character. She's definitely an unreliable narrator, and she isn't really very likable, actually. I didn't find her very likable, and I felt that the way she approached things was interesting, because she was so focused and very tunnel visioned in this mission of following this mystery. She definitely thought, like, what I'm doing is right. This is probably for some greater good. But she's extremely callous to the people that are in her life. And, you know, she herself creates destruction as she goes. And I felt like her approach to following this mystery was very much the approach that humanity has had that created the climate crisis itself, of not having a holistic approach to things, to being tunnel visioned, to truly believing that what you are doing is right without seeing the damage that's being done. So I thought that was like a really interesting way to have me think about our approaches to the climate crisis now, because I think that even approaches in like how do we address it end up following that sort of way of thinking. You can think of maybe some really famous billionaires who are very much like, I know the way forward, and they do think they're doing what's right, but maybe it isn't the right thing, and but they're so tunnel visioned. So I thought that was a really interesting way to present the story. Is it just me? Maybe it was just me.
There are a lot to unpack there, but yeah, I think there may be that aspect to her character that she is representative of someone who maybe is trying to do right by the world and pursue truth and pursue justice, but then ends up bringing destruction to everyone around her. There is that aspect to it. I more read it that she is representative of a kind of square, middle-class woman who works a 9-to-5 job, has a family, lives in the suburbs, and then she wakes up and she is engrossed and obsessed with exploring the truth and tracking down the answers to the mystery, and being taken in by this kind of like cult-like figure. And yeah, I think part of what he was saying is that we need to wake up to the truth of our responsibility in the ecological crisis, and I think that's part of her character as well. Mm-hmm. But with regards to her being unlikable, yeah, she is kind of terrifying. She's kind of a scary character, and she does exhibit a callousness to those innocent people around her who suffer as a result of her kind of digging into this mystery. And yeah, people are physically hurt because of that. And you know, that's well within the conventions of the genre, and some, you know, some of the protagonists in, say, Raymond Chandler or Dashiell Hammett are not very nice people. But it is interesting that he used a protagonist in this particular story that is so kind of callous and single-minded in her pursuit of the truth.
Yeah, I think one of the things, you know, we both have read, I've read most of Jeff VanderMeer's work, as have you. For this book, I think maybe one of the things that made me a little slower at like catching on to it is that within the Southern Reach trilogy and Born and Dead Astronaut, you have, as a reader, so much to play with in your own mind, so many ways to stretch your imagination. There's a huge palette to be worked with in your mind as the reader when you're imagining these worlds, whereas in this one is very close to our own world. And I didn't find it it's fun to play with in my mind, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I agree. I would say that thinking about the Southern Reach trilogy and Bourne, they're kind of like the settings are more iconic. And when I think back of those books and how like they're fantastical, whereas this one is, it's its own unique world as well, but it's much closer to our world. It takes place like 5 minutes in the future. You know what I mean? We can see kind of the reality of our world in this world, and at some points in the book, I felt like I was legitimately seeing what 5-10 years in the future is how it's gonna play out. And that's a terrifying thought, maybe, but I actually like that he was taking a more grounded approach in this book and exploring some of the issues in maybe a more direct way than he usually does.
Yeah. I think it's maybe the most accessible so far of his novels. What do you think?
Yeah, I would say that if you are put off by kind of like science fiction fantasy settings, this is, and you're curious about Jeff VanderMeer's oeuvre, this would be a good place to start because it is very grounded in a setting we would recognize. And then as the book progresses, as I said, that kind of like background noise becomes the foreground, and you really, those themes really start hitting home. And I thought it was really well done.
So you recommend it to the viewers to check out?
Yeah, I would highly recommend this book. It's really well done, and another triumph for Jeff VanderMeer. And if you haven't explored his work, this is a good place to start. Do pick up Hummingbird Salamander.
Yeah, and if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe down below, and hit the bell so you always know when there's a new video. And let us know below if you've read Hummingbird Salamander or if you plan to read it.
In the meantime, keep well.
And keep reading.